Madam President, as past chair of the Asiad, you perhaps have had a special Asian perspective on the importance of global trade that is reinforced by your own experience with remittances redistributed to the Philippines economy. What do you see as the best approach? Do we need to jumpstart the multilateral approach like Doha, or can we find comfort in a new regionalism of trade if we don't do Doha?
Well, first of all, what's the best approach to rebooting the world economy? That's the title of our session today. And when you talk about rebooting the global economy, that suggests something pretty radical, because when you reboot a computer, you have to turn it off first. But when we reboot an economy, we cannot turn it off. We cannot wipe the slates clean before we can start all over again, because there are people involved, there are lives involved. So what is very important here is that we must not neglect those who feel the hardship of the global downturn the most, and that is the poor. And any solution must take that into account. So in the Philippines, we took our bitter medicine years ago when we had our very painful fiscal reforms and financial reforms. So when the world crisis struck, we had the revenues to be able to invest in people as well as in infrastructure for the fiscal stimulus. And that is why in 2007, we had an 8% GNP growth, and in 2008, a 6% GNP growth. But having said that, and making sure that, that any radical change is not at the back is not on the back of those who can least afford it, we do need radical rethinking in the world. Number one, we need a fundamental reform of the global financial regulation. Number two, Doha must continue, must be completed. And that is where the interests of the developing countries can take the rightful place in the global structure of the economy. And third, the G7 must expand into a G20 or even a G30.
Mr. Prime Minister, on that slide. Madam President, when you hear all of this consternation and confusion, mostly within the G7, about bad banks and the difficulty in dealing with this unraveling financial system, mostly in the G7 economies, how do you have any optimism that we are going to move to a G20 regime when there's so much obsession at the moment within the G7 with its own peculiar problems?
Well, as the others have said in this table, in this platform, the meeting of the G20 in April is going to be a very important meeting. So that's already one. That's already one indication how important and how useful the G20 can be. But we must even go beyond the G20, because we need to have represented in the coordinated policy making of the world diverse kinds of economies. Because if we don't have these diverse economies represented on the table, then perspective will be lost and new ideas will not be gained. And furthermore, it is ironic that the developing countries now are doing better than the developed countries. And yet, if they will not have a say in how to structure the world economy, that's really wrong. So we need to have the developing countries represented in a bigger way. They have something to share. How are they able to keep their countries resilient? They have that to share. And another way by which we make the G20 or the G30 more successful or assure its success is that it should be complemented by the regional alliances being consulted more closely and being meshed together among themselves.
And Mr. Prime Minister, do you think you could